Welcome. Welcome to the Ministry Forum podcast, coming to you from the Center for Lifelong Learning at Knox College, where we connect, encourage, and resource ministry leaders all across Canada as they seek to thrive in their passion to share the gospel. I am your host, the Reverend John Borthwick, Director of the Center and Curator of all that is ministryforum.ca. I absolutely love that I get to do what I get to do, and most of all, that I get to share it all with all of you. So thanks for taking the time out of your day to give us a listen, whether you're a seasoned ministry leader or just beginning your journey. This podcast is made with you in mind. We are back, Ministry Forum community, and today we begin the fourth season of the Ministry Forum podcast with a returning guest, Laura Alary. Laura is a storyteller, educator, mother of three, and a writer of picture books. Her book, All the Faces of Me, was named the 2024 Charlotte Zolotow Award Honor Book. She's also the author of Here, the Dot We Call Home, one of my favorites for children's times in worship. Make Room for A Child's Guide to Lent and Easter, and The Astronomer Who Questioned Everything, among many, many others. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. She's a graduate of Dalhousie University with a Bachelor Honors, Knox College MDiv. We went to school together for a little bit. And the University of St. Michael's College PhD. Laura now works at Cavan Library at Knox College, where, among other things, she curates the picture books in ministry collection, and where I have the privilege of calling her friend and colleague and getting to work with her occasionally on things like this. In our first interview with Laura, way back in season 2, if you can imagine it, of the podcast, we talked to Laura about her calling to be a picture book author and storyteller and celebrated the ways in which we all answer vocation's call differently. And so today we're actually going to focus on a couple of specific new releases by Laura. This is a huge, huge year for her. How many books are coming out this year, Laura?
It's a big year. It's 5 in 2025.
5 in 2025.
Yep,
way to
5
go.
in 2025. So that's a record for me.
That's awesome. And by the end of the year, the grand total of books that you've released will be?
It will be 20.
20. Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Way to go. Well, it's great to have you on the podcast again, Laura, and we're delighted to have you as a returning guest. Welcome.
Well, thank you, John. I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome. So let's start with maybe how it feels to have so many of your creations being released in one year. And maybe for people who don't understand this publishing process, I certainly don't grasp it myself. How does this happen? How does this roll out? Do you have much control over it? What goes on?
Well, first of all, it feels amazing. Like it's, I said to one of my editors not long ago, because this industry is so competitive, each time I get an acceptance and, the years pass and eventually the book emerges, it always feels like a small miracle to me because the odds of that not happening are so great. So to have 5 in 1 year is huge for me. I'm grateful. It's also a little bit overwhelming because the whole publicity part of it, I have something resembling a spreadsheet to try to help me keep on top of how to promote what, when, and how. And I haven't completely dropped the ball yet, but I'm kind of at my I'm at my capacity. So, but anyway, it's great though. And it just happened that I had 2 books come out on the same day in May, and then these 2 are coming out within 2 weeks of one another in September. As for your question, how much control do I have? None whatsoever. So the way it works is that publishers have lists, and by list I mean the collection, like the particular books that are being published in any given season. And depending on the size of the publisher, there could be a spring list and fall list. Some publishers have 3 in a year. There would be a winter one as well. And the editorial directors and others plan those lists out years in advance. And it's quite a process. And I've only learned more about it over the last couple of years, but they're trying to balance so many things. So even just in children's publishing, they're trying to balance fiction, nonfiction, different genres, different ages. How many picture books do we have? How many middle grade? How many graphic novels? They're trying to figure out, okay, how do these themes relate to one another and to the season of the year that we're in? And also balancing diverse voices among authors and illustrators. So there's just so many variables to take into account. And as an author, all you can do is sit back and let that team do their work and then tell you when your book is coming out. Now, when I sign a contract, usually there's a question in there that says something like, do you, if your book is going to be published in the spring 2027 season, do you have anything else coming out that might compete with it? Now, in the case of these two books, one's fiction, one's nonfiction, Canadian publisher, American publisher, there are some similarities in theme, but they're not in direct competition with one another. So this is just how it happened. And then sometimes books get moved around too. Like I was supposed to have another one coming out in spring of 2026. And then there were some scheduling issues with the illustrator. And so that's not going to happen. So it'll be moved somewhere else. I don't know yet when. But yeah, you just try to be patient and wait and see how it all shakes down.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just of how it all pulls together. And I'm assuming I'm assuming there's not a lot of interplay between publishers. I would think like they're just publishing their stuff. They have their list. They're thinking about how they're going to roll things out. They're not checking in on other publishers of what other publishers are going to roll out, or do they have knowledge of that, would you say?
I'm not actually sure. I mean, I think that they have enough to do just to kind of handle their own stuff. But yeah, like I say, they do check in with the authors if you're with multiple publishers, because that's where it gets tricky. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing, just out of curiosity, just because I got to have answer a dream, I guess. I don't know what I would call it. I was very excited to receive the proofs of the books.
Oh, the ARCs,
the
advanced
that I could
reader
read
copy.
them beforehand. I even one of them that you sent me was very confidential and had actual comments and notes of change this, change that. I was like, wow.
Oops. Okay.
So exciting.
I think I sent you the wrong one.
I've destroyed all copies. Do not fear. Do not fear. There's nothing going to be released into the world. But one of the things that's kind of fun, especially about picture books, is the illustrations, and you mentioned those. Do you get a chance to say, I would like to work with this particular illustrator, or is the matching something that the publishers do, or is that a journey for you as well?
Well, it's primarily at the discretion of the publisher. It is their choice, their decision. What I've found in recent years, and I don't know whether this has changed in the industry or whether it's just that I have published enough now that I have sort of built a relationship with some publishers. I am being included in that conversation more, not so much in its initial stages, but sometimes, the editor might come to me when they're at that stage in the process and say, we're considering X, Y, and Z. Do you have a preference? Or what do you think about such and such for this book? That doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. And it's nice to have a little bit of input. And I did, in the case of both these books, I did have an opportunity to weigh in on that decision.
That's great. Yeah. And they look beautiful. People are in for a treat when they get to see them.
Thanks, John. Yeah.
I've already got to see them. I'm so excited.
And very different artistic styles, which is fun too. One's digital, one is entirely by hand. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. My daughter's going to the Ontario College of Art and Design, and some of the things you get to see through the students there and things that people are interested in. I'm always fascinated, especially around picture books, about how different mediums that people use to do a picture book. I remember picking one up in a bookstore and making a picture and sending it to my daughter and texting her with it because she's in textiles. And I said, this is a fully illustrated book using
In
textiles. Like,
textiles, yeah, I've seen that.
so cool.
And I love paper collage. I follow a number of
Yeah.
illustrators who work almost exclusively in paper collage, and it's yeah, love it.
Such an art form, and
Hmm.
such a devotion, like, to do that kind of thing. It's not
Yeah,
just a simple thing of like, we want to create these almost as pieces of art as well as being a book and a story that's told.
absolutely.
Amazing. So let's dive into, we're going to talk about a couple of books today that
Yeah.
are coming out. The first one that I hope everyone puts under their Christmas tree this year is actually about Christmas, Christmas that almost didn't happen, apparently. That's what it's called, The Christmas That Almost Wasn't. Let me give, for those who are listening, just a little description of the book. Aiden's city is hit with an ice storm just days before Christmas, causing the electrical grid to go down. All their Christmas plans are ruined. One disappointment piles on another. Grandma and Grandpa cannot travel. The Christmas pageant is canceled. There are no Christmas lights, and it's impossible to cook a Christmas dinner. But Aiden and his dad persevere to bring donuts and coffee to neighbors. And then they're invited to a neighborhood Christmas potluck. As Aiden Moms tells the Christmas story, he realizes that the first Christmas was full of disappointment and unexpected community too. Suddenly, Christmas feels special again as Aiden feels connected to the Bible story from long ago, to his grandparents far away, and to his neighbors and family nearby. God is here in the midst of it all. Sometimes Christmas is not what we hope or expect it to be. And the Christmas that almost wasn't invites readers to ponder how sometimes, when things are taken away, it brings us closer to the heart of the holy mystery that still draws us into its warmth. So, Laura, what's the origin story behind this book? I have a slight memory that it could be connected to something that happened in the province of Ontario.
Yes, I figured you would share that memory.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost always some story behind the story, and in this case, the connection is more direct than in many. I wrote this in the aftermath of the ice storm of 2013, which I expect that is what you're thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in case any listeners don't remember that or were not affected by it, it was a huge winter storm system that hit uh, on the night of the winter solstice, actually. I was coming back from leading a longest night service on December 21st, and we were hit by a massive quantity of freezing rain. And it's interesting because there's been one trade review of this book, and the reviewer refers to a snowstorm. And this has been an ongoing thing, that a snowstorm and an ice storm are not the same thing.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's an aside. So trees down, power lines down, millions of people without electricity, heat. In my neighborhood, some people lost power for up to 2 weeks. I think ours was out for about 4 days, but it was certainly out through Christmas Eve. Um, and when I think back to that time, I have this memory of very mixed up and kind of paradoxical feelings, because there was discomfort and inconvenience. You know, we were cold. My kids were sick of eating porridge after two, 2 days. We had about, I think, 25 candles burning on the dining room table just to raise the ambient temperature of the room enough to make it sort of bearable. The pipes in the church froze and burst and flooded the sanctuary. And so then there was all this worry, oh, is this going to happen to our house as well? And so, and of course, just a huge mess to clean up in the neighborhood. So there's a lot of stress and disappointment. No Christmas Eve service. People can't travel. But it was also exceptionally beautiful. I remember going out with my kids, and every twig and berry had this coating of ice on it. It was just extraordinary. There was coziness to it. We were wearing our winter clothes inside, bundled up on the couch. I read aloud from Laura Ingalls Wilder's The Long Winter to try to give us a little bit of perspective on the situation. We went to bed basically like almost when it got dark, and slept so soundly. Just that, like, those natural circadian rhythms just took over. And So, yeah, there was destruction, but beauty. There was discomfort, but coziness, busyness, but slowness. All of these apparent opposites coexisting. Um, so actually, the original title for this book was Charlie. I called the main character Charlie rather than Aiden, and it was Charlie's Mixed Up Christmas. That title didn't stay, but that was it. Just sort of represented that feeling of all of these opposites being together. Um, and then on Christmas morning, partly because of lack of power and partly because of the flood, the local Anglican church opened their doors and invited the Presbyterians to come and join them. And I remember sitting in the pew and listening to the priest, the Reverend Stephen Kierkegaard. He was preaching on the incarnation, as you would on Christmas morning, but he was talking about Christ entering into the mess and the vulnerability and the chaos of the world and infusing it with love. And it just hit me in a different way that year because we were surrounded by so much
Mm-hmm.
chaos and mess. And I remember feeling this sense of peace as I was listening to him and getting this having this image of sort of seen and unseen worlds coming together. And that also put me in mind of another Christmas story that I love called The True Meaning of Crumfest by David Wheel. Don't know whether he's a PEI author. And I won't go into detail about the story except to highly recommend it. But it's this little mouse called Eckhart, as in the medieval German mystic Meister Eckhart. And Eckhart wants to know the truth about this festival that the mice celebrate every year. It's this mysterious time of abundance when all of a sudden crumbs appear all over the place and things that are normally outside come inside. Like there's this tree that appears in the living room. And anyway, to make a long story short, it concludes when Eckhart has this realization that when the inside and the outside come together, that's Crumfest. And the first time I read that, I thought, wow, like that's just such a beautiful metaphor for incarnation. So as I was kind of pondering, well, how can I write about this ice storm experience? I knew that I wanted my story to have this little thread of mystery and wonder running through it. So I've tried to include that. And I also, I should say, I really wanted to portray the dark in a way that was good and beautiful. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's the origin of this one.
Yeah, amazing. I vaguely remember remember that event impacting, I think, certainly much more in the Toronto area and further eastern
Further east,
Ontario.
yeah.
Um, what I can remember is the blackout of
Hmm. Oh yes,
2003,
three. Yeah, the
2003,
summer
yeah,
summer 2003.
summer 2003, because I actually had a wedding scheduled for that Friday in the morning. A very weird time to have a wedding, but it was just that's when it was scheduled.
Mhm.
And I remember having to call into the radio station and then that sort of connection between neighbors and
Yeah,
lots of interesting things happen when everything goes dark.
yeah,
So yeah, in the book itself, it does have this. This feature of light and darkness. You've already described the sort of the beauty and dismal grumpiness that can happen. There is this sense of the negative. All the negatives are sort of playing into as you build the story. It spoils all Aiden's plans. It's kind of havoc in the town he's in. But then he goes and he offers some help to his neighbor, and she exclaims that he's the light in the darkness. So it's interesting that for Aiden, some of the big insights he has come to him because of the dark. Uh, we're going to talk about the next book in a second, but just can you speak a bit more about this, how these insights come to Aiden because of the dark?
yes. And it's interesting that you mentioned the neighbor's comment to him that you are light in the darkness, because that phrase represents the way many of us think about light and darkness, especially during Advent. That's the season when we really glorify light and anticipate the coming of the light of the world and so what I was struggling with was to acknowledge that is often how we see light and darkness in relationship to one another, and there is power in that. Like if you've been stuck in a blackout and you don't have a light source and then somebody comes with one, or if you've had a really difficult night that feels like it's never going to end and then the dawn comes and you've experienced this renewed energy. There's something really powerful about light in darkness. But I wanted to also to emphasize that darkness has its own gifts. So I was trying to do that as well in the book. So there are two kinds of darkness in The Christmas That Almost Wasn't. There's the physical or natural darkness that results from the blackout. Then there's the metaphysical darkness in the sense of the hard emotions. And when the book begins, Aidan experiences both of them, and they are both very unwelcome to him. As you say, they wreck his plans. They basically spoil everything. So I would say that what happens to Aidan is a very gentle, very mild version of the dark night of the soul. He starts out so full of excitement and anticipation, but then events completely beyond his control plunge him into this state of disappointment, confusion, and emptiness in a way, because everything was so full, and all of a sudden it's gone. There's kind of obscurity. He doesn't know what's going to happen next. He keeps waiting and hoping the lights are going to go back on, but they don't. He is not happy with the situation, but there's nothing he can do. So he's just stuck. But as you mentioned, he's not alone. And so with some prompting and guidance from his family, his dad in particular, and his neighbors, he actually goes into the dark. So he goes out, and I think he learns some things about generosity, empathy, hospitality, community, all of these things, these good things he experiences because of the darkness. And then toward the end, spoiler alert, he has this, a spiritual experience, really. It's a very deep connection to the nativity story. And the reason he has that deep connection is because the hard things in his own experience he sees reflected in the story, in the biblical story. I don't know if you're familiar with, I'm sure you are, Barbara Brown Taylor's book, Learning to Walk in the Dark. So she asks the question, what can you learn in the dark that you couldn't learn in the light? And I had that question in the back of my mind as I was shaping this story about Aidan.
Yeah, that's amazing. Definitely a powerful story, certainly for Christmas time, but a powerful story that shows the parallels between, as much as we have maybe a negative impression of darkness and as bad and all that, there are some things that come only from the darkness or as a part of the darkness, which will lead us into your next book.
Yeah.
I wanted to say one of the insights, and it sort of parallels to your next book and also to what you've been sharing, some of the things that you discover when the world goes dark, at least in the blackout experience that we had. We live in the city of Guelph, and where we were, our proximity was, during the blackout, our power came on fairly soon, like within a day, maybe like 24 hours or more. Other people's power didn't come on for days in the same city.
Right.
And what we discovered, and here, this might play with your, the negative, nasty things. What we discovered is if you live in close proximity to the sewage system plant, apparently it's one of the first things to come online. We got to keep that system going. And so in that little grid that we were in, we lucked out. We wouldn't have said we always felt great about being so close in proximity to the sewage plant, but
has its
interesting
moments.
how the
Yes.
dark is important to learn these things. So let's talk about your other book. It's also on this playing on this theme of darkness, but in a very different way. It's called "Who Needs the Dark? The many ways living things depend on darkness." And what I found is even I read it, and thank you for showing it. Yeah, for those of you who are not able to see our podcast, Laura is holding up the book, but you'll be able to see it yourself when you go and buy the book for yourself and your family. It's a really neat book, and I love actually that you have a number of these kinds of books in your almost 20 repertoire, kind of sciencey, learning, lots of really neat stuff that you write about. You certainly write from a Christian lens in some perspectives, telling Christian stories or sharing stuff for the liturgical year, things like that. But I love these books, and I would imagine that for you, there's in a sense a translation piece that's still happening, even in the midst of what you might call an educational book, that's sharing a bit of something of just kind of the concepts that you were just talking about around this light and darkness theme. I certainly learned some new things about what goes on in the dark from reading it, so I'm grateful for that. It was really quite interesting how you've painted that picture again around this theme. But let me describe the book for the listeners, and then let's talk a little more about it. So the description is, how do you feel about the dark? Is it creepy or cozy, eerie or awesome? The dark doesn't have to be scary. After all, it's for sleeping, for growing, for healing, and for changing into something new. Humans depend on the dark for their health and well-being, and so do other living things. A love letter to darkness. This informational picture book incorporates STEM content to gently encourage leaders to look at the dark in new ways. Its lyrical, poetic text and soft, striking illustrations make for a delightful read aloud. And so Who Needs the Dark is certainly very different from the previous one, but it's still on this theme of darkness, and it's coming out this month as well. The podcast will be released in September. So we already talked about the timing wasn't necessarily intentional, but I wonder, are the books connected in some way to each other? Were you writing in them at the same time, or is there a connection on this overall theme of darkness for you?
Yes, I think they both arise from similar kinds of rumination on darkness and what we can learn from it. Just to affirm what you just said, the timing is purely coincidental. I have no control over that whatsoever. Although it's a fun challenge sometimes when I find out, oh my gosh, this one's coming out on the 16th of September and this one on the 30th. Are there ways that I can help people connect these two books? And in this case, I think the answer is yes, because they do work together quite nicely, especially in some contexts. And I will say more about that. As you've said, Who Needs the Dark is about natural or physical darkness and why we need it, which we do. All life on Earth has developed within this balance of day and night, darkness and light. And so, we're all adapted to it. We often connect light with life for obvious reasons. I have a book about photosynthesis too. But we need the dark just as much for many of the reasons that the description names, resting, healing, growing, dreaming, and so on. So what Who Needs the Dark does is it shows specific ways that darkness is helpful in the life of a child. So, for example, holding them in the womb before they're born, or supporting sleep when the body is healing itself, or the mind is picking away at problems and solving them. And then it, after it shows that in the life of a child, then it goes and it looks at something similar in nature. So the book really emphasizes a kind of kinship between humans and the rest of the natural world. So as you were getting at earlier, I love to write STEM books, but there's always this thread of kind of philosophy that runs through them. So yeah, one of the things that the books have in common, other than the obvious theme of darkness, is that they were both dreamed up during Advent.
Hmm.
So they kind of arose from that soil. I love Advent. It's my favorite season of the liturgical year. I love its symbolism. But over the past, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so, I've been thinking a lot more intentionally about the language we use around and the imagery for light and darkness and the effect of constantly associating darkness with misery, ignorance, evil, and so on. Um, so as I was thinking about this, I thought, well, I want to be intentional about exploring how darkness is beneficial to us. And that kind of led me down two paths. One of them was learning about physical darkness and why it's good and necessary. And that one led me to Who Needs the Dark? And then the other path was looking at the spiritual or metaphysical darkness and how that's beneficial. And that kind of led me in a different direction to the Christmas that almost wasn't.
Hmm.
But they both kind of came from the same point of origin in a way. Um, this is a bit of an aside maybe, but I was just going to say, if anybody is interested in using these two books to explore these themes during Advent, I think they work well together. I would start with Who Needs the Dark because it begins with what's most familiar, the child's own experience of darkness. And then it can kind of prompt them to think about what's good and what's beautiful about it. And then there's another book that I have to mention. It's by Gail Boss called All Creation Waits. There's an original version of it, and then there's a picture book version, and it's outstanding. And what it does is it connects the Advent themes of waiting and transformation to what's happening to animals as they're getting ready to, well, for the dark and cold of winter. And there's this beautiful refrain in the book: the dark is not an end, it's a door. It's the way a new beginning comes. So
Hmm.
that just frames darkness in such a positive way. And then of course it makes that bridge to Advent and then to Christmas. And so from there you could go very naturally into a book like The Christmas That Almost Wasn't, and sit down with kids and say, okay, what kind of darkness do we see in this book, and what are some of, like, how does Aiden experience it, and what are some of the things that he learns from it?
Hmm. Yeah, I kind of as I was reading it, I was thinking of um, it kind of being a potential answer in the mind of helpful in the mind of a child to like being afraid of the dark,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of like, we're so afraid of the dark and for a variety of reasons as a child.
Yeah.
And I was imagining a child being able to pull one of the pieces, one of the things from the book and be able to say, oh,
Yeah.
but actually as a parent, you could say, but but here's why the dark is important for a creature or for something out in the world, and this could be sort of an anchor for a child of like, oh yeah, I guess dark is helpful because something is going to benefit from
Yeah.
being the dark or needs the dark as a part of its
Exactly.
growth or healing or whatever that might be.
And that's
Yeah.
part of my hope for that book, that it does
Yeah.
exactly that.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it sounds like from the two books and from what you just shared there around the season of Advent and things like that, um, I sense you think it's pretty important to talk to children about the gifts of the dark or the positive aspects of darkness. Did you want to share more about of why you think that's important? Is it an answer to something that maybe we see out in the world or out in common culture today? I don't know. I'll leave it to you to provide a thought on that.
So, yes, I do think it is important to talk and think and wonder with children about the gifts of darkness. In a nutshell, I think this is because how we handle our fear of the dark has consequences. Um, so think about, I'm going to start with natural or physical darkness. Lots and lots of kids are scared of the dark, and some adults too. I know I was when I was a child, and I had the little sunflower nightlight in my room, and um, part of that's a very natural response to the unknown. I mean, we're wired to be cautious of potential risks or potential dangers, especially when we don't see well. Um, but Sometimes our imaginations create monsters where there aren't any, and then we exaggerate the risks. And it's not just kids who do that. How do we respond when a child is afraid of the dark? Well, we add more light, right? Like you stick the night light in the outlet, you leave the hall light on, maybe add little like fancy lighting in your garden. If it's a public space, we add more security lighting. As human beings, more and brighter light makes us feel safe, even if it objectively doesn't do that. Like
Hmm.
it just makes us feel safer.
Mm-hmm.
But it also comes at a cost.
Mm-hmm.
We disturb ecosystems that depend on this balance between light and dark. And as I was reading, I was just really affected by realizing what a huge problem light pollution has become, um, leading to extinction of whole species, pollinators especially, and that becomes an enormous problem for everybody in the food web.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we damage human health by interfering with our natural sleep cycles, circadian rhythms. Um, we don't necessarily give our children a chance to befriend the dark and see what's beautiful about it. And then the other thing is, if we're always pushing back the dark, if we're always using light to get rid of it, we never practice being brave or kind of facing some of the things that scare us. And I was remembering as a kid being terrified to go down into the basement. And my parents would give me these little errands that involved going to the basement. And I don't know if it was intentional, but sometimes I think maybe they made me do that just so I could practice being in this, because they knew no harm was going to come to me, but they were letting me practice facing those fears a little bit at a time and just kind of building up my courage. And if we never do that, that's not beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, and
so
it's interesting you were saying about like the impact of having lights on all the time. The couple things came to mind: being in close proximity, or yourself in the city of Toronto. Often, a lot of the high-rise buildings and business offices and stuff like that, they've actually had campaigns where they've tried to turn off the lights in
yeah,
those spaces because of the impact it has on birds and other kinds of things. That's an interesting one. And then I think in much of North America, I would imagine there are places where the prevalence of ambient light or extra light isn't as prevalent in certain spaces in North America. But if you've ever been further out and away in the world, there are places where, just as you described in Aiden's story, when nighttime comes, it's night
mm-hmm.
and everyone stops working. And if you've been in places like that, where I remember describing it as, it was so dark that when you opened your eyes, it was still dark, like so,
Mm-hmm.
like that kind of dark. Whereas in your house, if it's all dark, there's enough ambient bits of light.
Yeah.
Like you look outside and there's probably a street light somewhere, or there's some kinds of. I'm fascinated by homes these days. I don't know what they're thinking, but no offense to anyone who has a home like this, I guess, but it's just so interesting to me. Homes that are putting lights all around the home and
Right.
they're on all night long. It's
Yeah.
like, wow. Like, how do you even, like, doesn't the light come into the house in some way? But yeah, our sense of more lights is what needed, as opposed to building this relationship with the darkness.
Well, there's an organization called Dark Sky International, and I've been following them and kind of exploring their website. And they've got some
Hmm.
really helpful stuff, not only on the importance of darkness and the risks all of that light poses, even in our neighborhoods, but they've also got some, suggestions for pollinator-friendly lighting, and because it's not as simple as saying, oh, let's just get rid of all artificial light. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But there's better and worse lighting.
Hmm.
So there are things that we can do
Hmm.
to. But part of it is awareness and just realizing, oh, do I really need to spotlight or floodlight my house all night long? Like, why? And
Hmm.
then what impact is that having on other things beyond me and my family?
Hmm. Hmm. Did you have other, you started with nature? Is there
Oh yeah.
other areas around? Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the physical darkness. And then
Mm-hmm.
the metaphysical darkness kind of follows a similar path. Um, for as I said, for Aiden in the story, um, darkness is kind of a metaphor for this sense of obscurity, not knowing what's going to happen next, and also the sense of powerlessness. Like everything's gone haywire, and there's absolutely nothing he can do about it. He wants the lights to go back on, but he can't make them go back on. He can't get rid of the dark, and that's kind of how a lot of us feel at one time or another when unwelcome events come and we've got hard emotions in response. Um, so sometimes, what do we do? We try to turn the lights on. Um, I think certain strands of Christianity are. I was going to say particularly good at that. That's not really what I'm trying to say. There's kind of a relentless positivity
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, that really isn't helpful in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
And I was remembering as a child, I think I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and I went to vacation Bible school at a church of a different denomination. And I was already a little bit off going in because I didn't really know anybody. I was quite shy, and it was like there was a very high energy level that was a bit overwhelming for me. Um, but what made it worse was at the end of every day, they would give prizes to the kids who smiled the most. So, needless to say,
Jesus loves your
I didn't.
smiles, I
That's
guess.
right.
Yeah.
If you've got
Yeah.
Jesus in your heart, you're going to be happy all the time. So, what I took away from that was this sense that the hard feelings that I was having were not welcome. There was no
Mm-hmm.
place for those. And I think that on a larger scale, if with children, if we're always associating the presence of God with what's bright and cheerful and happy, what on earth does that say to them
Mm-hmm.
when that is not how they're feeling and when circumstances are not cheerful and bright? Um, as a parent, of course, I want my children to be happy, but it's like that basement thing, right? Like I know
Mm-hmm.
that as human beings alive in this world, they will not be happy all the time. It's not possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I have always wanted them not just to avoid the hard feelings, but to actually build up the courage to explore and express them, like to kind of sit with them, say, how am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? And just, kind of build up the patience and the courage that we all need as people living in this world to stay with things that we find difficult and maybe even um, discover that there are things to be learned or that there are gifts hidden in there. And I say that with caution because what I'm not saying is that, oh, terrible things happen to teach us lessons. That's not the
Mm-hmm.
message that I'm trying to send. What I'm saying is that um, it is possible to um, to kind of practice patience and courage and openness to what the transformations that may come out of the dark.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, those are amazing life lessons for sure, for children of all ages,
yeah,
yeah,
and I mean,
from
and it
from 0
doesn't.
to 115, whatever you've got going on. Some of
Yeah,
us need to realize that, yeah, sometimes life happens the way it does, and not that we want this to happen so that we can learn things, or we
mm-hmm,
want this to happen to us so we can grow. Like it's not like it's that's not the ultimate connection. It's sort of like, how do I make meaning in the midst of this?
mm-hmm,
How do I find a way forward in when the power goes out because of an ice storm, or when plans get ruined, or when bigger things in this world happen. um, I've always been grounded by Psalm 23 that always talks about
Through the valley.
through the valley, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, if you were really going to be cool, God, why don't you make a bridge over the valley that I don't have to go through any of that valley? But that's not what's said. And it's said within a sense of, and I will go with you through
Yeah,
that valley.
it's that presence in the dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that can come in the embodiment of, as you've said shared in this the story around Christmas. That can come through connectivity with other people, or having a sense of the bigger story that's going on around you, whatever that might look like. But also as human beings who are residents of this planet that includes a lot more than just us.
Right.
Our connectivity to the earth itself and to created things can really deepen our appreciation of how something happening to us or our desire to fix something that's happening to us could have impacts on other things. I think those are the wider stories you're telling within a children's book.
Exactly.
That can really be meaningful both for parent or grandparent or whoever wants to share this story with a child as well. Yeah. Amazing stuff, Laura.
Thanks, John.
Anything I haven't asked that you wanted to share or get in there?
Well, I have 3 little tidbits that I'd like to share.
Tidbits. I love tidbits.
Okay. So the first tidbit is that for anyone who is interested, The Christmas That Almost Wasn't has a free discussion and activity guide that I've written to go with it. There is a fair amount of, well, not a fair amount, but a couple of pages of back matter in the back of the book that has some kind of suggestions for playing with light and darkness, and the activity guide expands on that. So there's a little bit about lament with children, the longest night, so on. And that's available through the publisher, Beaming Books. If you go to their website to the product page, it's just a free PDF you can download. Both books are the core of a workshop that I'm going to be doing at the Toronto Children's Ministry Conference on November 1st, I believe. It's a Saturday. So, if anybody's in the GTA or beyond, registration is open for that conference. It'd be great to see you there. And there is going to be a launch for both books at Knox College on Wednesday, October 15th from 5 to 7. So we're going to be celebrating the dark.
Way to go. And Laura, I know that self-promotion isn't really your thing, but you did a fantastic job. Your publisher will be pleased and everything else. But
thanks, John.
But honestly, I mean, I think the kinds of things you're putting out into the world, what we talked about in our previous podcast episode with you around, where this comes from, your heart for it, your passion for it, the spirit, the creativity, the things that happen. I think this is beautiful that you get a chance to put this into the mix. In a sense, we talked about this in the previous podcast, but the word count is so small in these books that you're putting out there. And I know that you have the capacity to write, a PhD and a thesis
I can go on and on.
100,000 words. But the fact that you're able to package it in this just tiny piece, but yet it can be so meaningful, I think is just a beautiful gift to the world. And I hope people will reach out to get your books and to connect with you in the ways that you've already offered. I also really love that, and I'm glad you mentioned that as a tidbit. I really appreciated it as at the end of the book, because you don't always see that in children's picture books, like kind of a little more thought-provoking. Maybe for the reader themselves to sort of think about, oh, okay, we've read this story. That was great. Now what? But you give some backstory or back matter, is that what you called it?
Back matter, yeah, that's the term for it.
So technical. That is helpful, I think, for the reader to sort of think, oh, yeah, I could talk more about this, or this is a theme that comes up, and how could I explore that a little more deeper?
Yeah, it's in there to help, especially teachers, parents, caregivers, just to say, okay, besides reading the book, where else can we take this conversation? Or in some cases, what activities like in the Who Needs the Dark, there's a couple of try this little experiments that kids can do. And then there's activities as well in the back matter of The Christmas That Almost Wasn't.
Yeah, both books had that. I thought that was amazing. Really, really helpful. Laura, appreciate you so much. So glad that you have joined us again on the podcast. You are launching our 4th season. So we're grateful for that. This episode is coming out the week that these books are sort of either have just been released or are about to be released, so folks can purchase them or pre-order them if they're not quite ready. And yeah, I'm so glad you also highlighted the Toronto
Children's Ministry
Conference. We highlighted that last year. I think you were a presenter there last year as well.
Yeah, I was.
And we're people can learn more about it at ministryforum.ca, and our calendar will certainly be celebrating that as well. Laura, it's been so great to have you again as a guest on the podcast. I appreciate you and the work that you do and the ministry that you have through these books. So grateful that we're going to get to celebrate a book launch of yours next month. Thank you for joining me.
It's been a pleasure, John. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us today on the Ministry Forum podcast. We hope today's episode resonated with you and sparked your curiosity. Remember, you're not alone in your ministry journey. We're at the other end of some form of technology, and our team is committed to working hard to support your ministry every step of the way. If you enjoyed today's episode, tell your friends, your family, and your colleagues. Tell someone. Please don't keep us a secret. And of course, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review in the places you listen to podcasts. Your feedback helps us reach more ministry leaders just like you. And honestly, it reminds us that we're not alone either. And don't forget to follow us on social media at Ministry Forum on all of our channels. You can visit our website at ministryforum.ca for more resources, keeping up with upcoming events, and ways to connect with our growing community. Until next time, may God's strength and courage be yours in all that you do. May you be fearless, not reckless. And may you be well in body, mind, and spirit. And may you be at